Unless you act, it's just rhetoric. Baltic states are skeptical of Western European leadership. Me too, by the way. Retired Lieutenant General Dan Caine, US President Donald Trump's nominee for the chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff. What does it all mean for Ukraine? And head of communications at Razom we stand, former Vice Mayor of Arcata, California, Jason Kirkpatrick, joins us for a Blades talk. So don't miss it. Good afternoon. My name is Henry Caine and we're UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Since the end of the Cold War, the Baltic nations, Poland and other countries of the former Eastern Bloc have seen membership in the US-led NATO as the only safe bulwark against a growingly hostile Russia. Bordering Russia and its ally Belarus, the three Baltic nations, Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania, understand clearly that the breakdown of this security structure would threaten their very existence. After Moscow launched its all-out war against Ukraine in 2022, the US dispatched an additional 20,000 troops to reinforce the alliance's eastern frontier, bringing up the total number of its troops on the continent to over 100,000. Analysts estimate that as of 2024, the US military deployment in Europe included some 14 US soldiers in Poland, 1,000 in Lithuania and just 700 in Estonia. While a relatively meager force, the presence, however, ensures that if anybody attacks host countries, they face US soldiers from day one. But does it really ensure anything these days? Like, Russia launches a missile, NATO soldiers die, and then we all watch what? NATO falling apart while Trump yells at Europe and Europe shrugs and hesitates, just as it always did. I mean, that is what Europe was created for, shrugging shoulders and expressing deepest and sincerest concerns. It was the case with World War I, it was exactly the case with World War II, and now history repeating itself. Appeasing a Russian tyrant is still an option for some in Europe, a better one than fighting him off. Also, Europe fears that the Trump administration might withdraw the 20,000 soldiers sent by then US President Joe Biden, as it seeks a rapprochement with the Kremlin and a swift peace deal in Ukraine at whatever the cost of such a deal is for Ukraine. Catastrophe? Whatever. The United States has a nice big ocean to hide behind, says Trump. So what about Europe? Well, historically, Europe's defense initiatives have often been limited to mere discussions or overambitious and controversial plans like European army, whatever that means, without any substantial practical implementation, actually. And as the US under Trump chooses an increasingly hostile posture toward Europe, the United Kingdom and France have been gearing up to lead the continent's defense without Washington. French President Emmanuel Macron has coined the term strategic autonomy, which envisions a self-sufficient Europe that can defend itself and export its agenda without the need for American approval. Days after his visit to Washington, Macron said that Europe must rediscover taste for risk, ambition and power and abandon its happy vassalage under the US. Wow. Nicely put indeed, President Macron. But Estonia's former president, Toomas Hendrik Ilves, puts it even a bit more concrete. Unless you pay for something, then it's just a lot of rhetoric. Pointing actually to the fact that France, among others, blocked the US planned €40 billion military aid package for Ukraine. So I guess it's just talking, right? In 2024, two Baltic politicians came to lead the European Commission's top foreign and security policy posts. Kaja Kallas from Estonia as the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Andrius Kubilius from Lithuania as the Defense Commissioner. The situation has slowly changed. We, the Baltics, getting in a better positions, mainly because of Poland, they say. You cannot ignore Poland, Ilves said that. Poland has indeed emerged as a new heavyweight of sorts on the European security scene with massive purchases of tanks, jets and other military hardware, aiming to spend 4.7% of GDP on defense this year. The Polish voice also became more relevant with Prime Minister Donald Tusk's pro-European shift and the revitalization and expansion of formats like the Weimar Triangle, which also includes France and Germany. Even though the Baltics, as well as Poland and the Nordic countries, have demonstrated their commitment to defense, Trump provided few assurances in return. His recent steps signal that a major restructuring of Europe's security order may be inevitable. Well, I think it may be a good thing, actually. The only thing that bothers me is that Putin also thinks it's good. So the question is, who's going to be first to shut up finally and act already? Retired Lieutenant General Dan Caine, US President Donald Trump's nominee for the chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, underscored the importance of US military support for Ukraine in a Senate confirmation hearing on 1st of April.
From a military standpoint, Ukraine has the right to self-defense. And from that standpoint, our security assistance helps Ukraine to defend itself. Our assistance improves Ukraine's position at the negotiating table and deters Russia from further aggression. Lieutenant General Dan Caine, nominee for the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Some of the comments stand in contrast to Trump's policies, actually, as the new administration has not approved any new military packages for Ukraine and even briefly paused defense assistance allocated by his predecessor, President Joe Biden. At the same time, Trump has urged Europe to take more responsibility for Ukraine's defense, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Even before taking office, the new US president has pledged to broker a swift peace deal in Ukraine. We all remember that, of course. These days, while Kyiv agreed to a full 30-day truce during talks on March 11th, Moscow keeps on slowing the process down by wanting it all. A ban on military aid, another government in Ukraine, a third part of the moon and a half of Jupiter, whatever, clearly wanting one thing: this war to go on, to continue. In this regard, discussing what threat Moscow poses to the US and its allies, Dan Caine said that Russia's conventional capabilities have been strained by its war against Ukraine. But he warned against possible asymmetric activities below the, I quote, threshold of military conflict, end of quote. Caine noted that Russian dictator Putin remains committed to his war goals, of course, including securing territorial gains, and what he says is forcing Ukrainian neutrality. And that neutrality is the Kremlin has demanded Ukraine's full withdrawal from the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson oblasts. The four partially occupied Ukrainian regions it illegally claimed as Russian territory. But you know what? Maybe that's all right. Maybe we do that. Yes, if Trump gives Alaska back to Mother Russia, how about that? And Germany must also give some parts that once were Russian or Soviet or whatever, why not? As what Trump and Putin are clearly showing to the world that these days there is no international law other than a law of pure and brutal force. And the more brutal that force is, the more legitimate it gets. It works like that. If you're a Russian dictator, you invade, you burn, you murder, you abduct children and do whatever the hell you want, then just you wait until Trump is in power and negotiate to what extent exactly your criminal deeds would be accepted as legitimate. Well, let's see what General Dan Caine can do about all of that. Head of Communications at Razom Withstand Fund, the former Vice Mayor of Arcata, California, Jason Kirkpatrick, is with us. Thank you so very much for joining, Mr. Kirkpatrick. Hello.
Thanks for having me on.
Right, so the United States administration just does not really want to exert any military pressure on Russia. That is obvious. Still, from time to time, we hear threats from Donald Trump to impose, new sanctions. Is he serious about it? I mean, it's Trump's dear good old friend, Vlad Putin. Why would he want to annoy his friend? Pardon me for joking.
Well, we see Trump saying different things, sometimes even two different positions he takes in the same sentence, right?
Right.
And from the last week, everyone in Ukraine can have whiplash, bouncing back and forth from the different kinds of statements he says. But I think that if Trump has some kind of core values as a human being, I would say that he does want to end the war and end the killing. That's one thing that I think we could trust is maybe a strong word, but I think that we can see that he says this again. He wants to stop the killing. I think he means it.
Right.
What that means when he speaks to Vladimir Putin is one thing or another. We actually don't know what he's doing, but it does seem like with this latest basically rejection of the Trump peace proposal by the Putin administration, Trump there are some possibilities to put pressure on from the USA. And one good thing for those in Ukraine, those that want peace, those that want to adjust into this war, is the new bill that's been introduced in the US Congress. There was a lot of news about this last night, that Senator Lindsey Graham from USA, the Republican, together with the Democrat Richard Blumenthal, have introduced new legislation that is absolutely strong. And we've heard about this in the last couple of months. So people know probably Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham in Ukraine. He's been there quite a few times. He has been supportive of the aid. Some figures we've heard, it's hard to say, but maybe the USA is providing about $2 billion a month in military aid, and I think Senator Lindsey Graham has backed a lot of that. And the new bill that have a draft right here in front of me with some wording, that 50 lawmakers have agreed to support sanctions on Russia in addition to a 500% tariff on imported goods from countries that buy Russian oil, gas, uranium, and other products, if Russian efforts to end the war are not advanced. This is very serious. This would have a big impact. And there are a lot of Republicans pushing Trump to do this.
Well, don't get me wrong, it is very serious. At least it looks very serious. But are there any real economic levers left for the United States to use actually against Russia? Will it work 500%, 1,000%? How much is it can be translated into real force against the dictatorship?
Sure. I mean, in this case, if we can measure force, maybe, for example, in the unit of billions of dollars. So every $1 billion less that goes to Russia is that many less rockets, bullets, bombs that Putin can buy for the war.
Right.
So yes or no, black or white, will the war end or not? I think everyone can agree the less money that Russia gets, the better. And so something that we can ask for, something we can push for. I'm an American, I push for this. I encourage all of my contacts in the USA to push at their local congressional level for these kind of changes. Is to put these kind of sanctions on, and especially it's the Russian fossil fuel industry that is the main driver of the budget. They create the most income from abroad, the fossil fuel exports. So we're talking about LNG gas exports. We're talking about oil. Some of that goes to China. Some goes to India. Unfortunately, Europe is buying too much LNG. We see Germany somewhere around 5%, give or take a few percent of Germany's LNG gas that it imports is from Russia.
Right.
This is the low-hanging fruit that we can ask. We can ask Trump and the U.S. administration to sanction it. That there should be no more freely flowing oil moving abroad with the transactions done in dollars. And this has worked in the past. So when Biden put some stronger sanctions on a few months back, then even shipping companies that were shipping oil to China weren't able to offload that oil because those ships got sanctioned while they were en route. And this cost hundreds of millions maybe hundreds of millions for one shipload when we're talking about peak times. So these sanctions could have a big effect. And if we can stop a few billions or many billions or the threat of a collapse to this industry, then that's very serious.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Count me in. I'm just, there have been so many talking around all these 3 years in a row. So amen to that, absolutely. But we talk about the China and we talk about India a little bit later on, about shadow fleet just as well. But what about the Europe? Europe, what tools does the European Union, we in Europe, have at our disposal to increase pressure on Russia? Do you see any?
Yes, let's take, for example, the UK.
Right.
The UK has, unfortunately, still a lot of companies in London, the big financial center. Some of these companies are involved in insuring ships or even shipping companies. There are shipping companies based in the UK like Seapeak, S-E-A-P-E-A-K, They're operating out of Glasgow, and they have ships that are transporting Russian LNG. This is shocking because Keir Starmer, before him, it was the last government of the UK, going back to Boris Johnson. They said, we support Ukraine. Well, they do, but actually they also help Ukraine. They help Russia to fund much of the weapons they rain down upon Ukraine. It's really hypocritical. But one thing that's being pushed for right now is to expose what this company CPeak is doing, based in Glasgow, that they're actually shipping Russian fossil fuels. They're helping the Kremlin. They're helping Putin to raise money for his war effort. And if the UK is going to say we should support Ukraine, then governments like that have to stop being
Right.
hypocritical, and they have to stop allowing any collaboration with Russia. It's the same for Germany. Germany has a new government coming in. It's going to be a center-right to center-left government with the CDU and the SPD. They're having negotiations right now for their coalition agreement, and soon there will be officially a new chancellor, a new government. And we need them to say, okay, we need to stop the little bit of LNG gas that's still coming from Russia via ships and then entering through ports in Belgium and France. Germany needs to stop that and stop sending any money to Russia. These are things that can be done. These are things that actually are not that difficult. And these are things that must be done as from the European side as well, as Europe finally acknowledges that they need to step up and first thank Ukrainians for being on the front line of Europe, but
Yeah, just by the
also
way.
take their responsibility really seriously, more seriously, to actually support Ukraine 100%.
You know what? I was about to ask you about the Russian shadow fleet and is there any efficient way to fight it, blah, 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 and so on. But I have a suggestion. What if we, as a country, as Ukraine, send just one ship to sink a week, one ship of the shadow fleet of Russian Federation, and just see what happens? I mean, this is a good proposal.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on these topics. It's not my area of expertise.
Not
I'm sure
my
that would have an
area
impact.
too. Absolutely, but there was actually a question under my statement because many people ask, what do we do about the shadow fleets? It's impossible. There are like thousands of vessels, or even more, maybe, I don't know. And the oil and gas is still leaking. You're absolutely right. But what if we sink those ships just like that? Russia says,
Well,
it's not us in Ukraine. Well, let's do it the same way. It's a game for two. Let's sink their ships and say that it's not us.
Well, sunken ships can't deliver fossil fuels. But I can say one other thing that we work on at my organization is trying to get these organizations that are sanctioning ships to actually align on the sanctions. So the European Union has their own set of sanctions. The USA has their own set of sanctions. UK has theirs, Canada has them, but they're all different and they don't align. And there are some that might be sanctioned, for example, by the UK that are not sanctioned by the US, and the US does others. So these ships can get around those sanctions. And Ukraine is dealing with the military front. That's what Ukrainians, unfortunately, the strong, brave Ukrainians have to deal with. This war on their front. But for the rest of the people who don't have it so hard, who actually have an easy life, who are living outside of a war zone, I encourage them, they should at least step up and make sure that all these sanctions are much stronger, and make sure that they're all aligned, and that can have a strong impact. So these people, these government leaders, they do listen to Ukrainian voices. I was in Washington, D.C. not so long ago, a few months ago, with a group of Ukrainian mayors, which was a fantastic trip. And I met with politicians and leaders in Washington, D.C., who invited these Ukrainian mayors to come and tell their stories. And I can tell you that you could have heard a pin drop. It was so quiet in the room when people asked Ukrainian mayors to speak, and then they told their stories. It was just amazing. People paid attention. Politicians, I tell you, politicians, they don't pay a lot of attention to other politicians. They're tired of hearing them talk. But to listen to these Ukrainian politicians and mayors, people heard what they had to say. So when Ukrainian leaders can come out with a unified voice and say, we need this concrete thing done. We need these sanctions done on the shadow fleet or on shipping companies like CPeak in Glasgow that are shipping Russian LNG. and Ukrainians can say this clearly, then
Right.
I think people listen. The problem is you have to repeat and repeat and repeat the same thing 100 times to be heard. And there's so much going on. It's a difficult situation.
Well, maybe you're right. Maybe I was wrong. We don't need to sink Russian ships. I mean, the from the Shadow Fleet. We may sing this, whatever that company name is, C, whatever.
CPEAK. CPEAK.
Right.
SEAPEAK. They should be embarrassed to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
SEAPEAK. CPEAK in Glasgow.
Well, I mean, why should they be embarrassed? I mean, there's a lot of people like say it's not our wars, and we didn't care about wars in Africa, we in Ukraine. I mean, because it's far away, you know. So that's us. That's human thing. We care the things that right here that hurt us right now. But hopefully, maybe the world will. I mean, and thank you so very much, Mr. Kirkpatrick, for joining and Ukrainian mayors and opening the doors for them. This is a big, big thing. We really appreciate that. That's one thing. And the last question for tonight. The primary consumers of Russian energy resources are China, India, and countries of the global south. If I make a statement that their stance is of today largely has been like, it's not our problem, just as I spoke, and not our war, and we want our oil and gas, would you agree with me?
Well, I don't agree with this statement because I don't think that that's a good solution. I think also if we want to avoid war in the long term, if any nation wants to have economic health, let's just focus on the economic health. Actually, the cheapest form of energy in the last year is clean energy. So because the sun, when it shines, it's free. When the wind, when it blows, that wind comes for free. You put up a solar panel, you put up a windmill, you don't have to pay anyone to extract those resources or refine them or to send them to you because they are in your country. Ukraine has sun. India has a lot of sun. China
Right.
has a lot of sun. China makes the cheapest solar panels in the world. Their electric car industry is now booming. They're shutting down or ending coal production quicker than they expected because it's getting too expensive. So let me just talk about the economics just briefly and end on this point maybe. If a country, any country, and I'm answering your question about India and China.
Right.
If they want to have national security, if they want to have energy security, if they want to have a booming economy, then they should stop importing other people's fossil fuels like Russia or anyone's. Stop sending their own rupees from India or money from China or anywhere. Stop sending it outside the country. Keep it in their own country. Put up solar and wind panels. You will have energy security. You will have self-reliance. You will have a better economy as you create high-skilled jobs. And that's really the way of the future, clean energy. And then nobody will need Russian oil or gas anymore.
Exactly the answer I was expecting from you. Thank you so very much. Your expertise is amazing and you're an amazing personality. I know, I can tell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on and have a good day.
Have a good one.
Best of wishes to everyone.
Thank you. Bye. That was it for tonight. My name is Henry Caine and we are UATV English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for you, for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. We ask in return, share and comment. Your voice matters as it in turn helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Stay safe and see you very soon. Goodbye.